Chapter 8. The Cop Killer. Chester Allen took a chair and sat. He put the gun over in front of Allen. "Deputy, I'm not the one who shot you. I want to give myself up into your hands. I don't want to die." Susan looked over at Chester. "Chet, who shot Allen?" Chester answered, "I don't know, but when I heard about the shooting, I knew everyone would say that I did it. I don't want to be shot." Chester sobbed, "Susie, you have to believe me. Seth was the one who convinced everyone I did all those terrible things. I believe that he was the guilty one." About that time, Amber came in. Pistol in hand. "Chester Allen, you're under arrest." Chester turned white as a sheet. "Oh no. Please, don't shoot." Allen stood. "Amber, put your gun away. Chet just gave me his .45. He says that he is not the one who shot me." Susan spoke up. "Amber, I took a .38 caliber bullet out of Allen, not a .45. Amber blinked a couple of times, confused. Allen continued, "From what I have seen, I believe him. Have a seat, partner." Amber sat. Susan and Roger relaxed and sat, too. Amber shrugged. "What now, partner?" Allen answered, "We call Sheriff Murdoch and relax until he tells us what to do." Amber keyed her radio. "Dispatch, Unit MV-04. Inform Sheriff Murdoch that we have Chester Allen here. He has surrendered to Allen, Unit MV-03. We will keep him here in the Smith home until the sheriff gets here and assess the situation. 10-4? Unit MV-04, 10-4. Susan went into the kitchen and returned with coffee for everyone. Even Roger. We all could use a little coffee to relax and wait. Roger was excited. "Are you my uncle?" Chester gave Roger a tired smile. "Yes, Roger, I am your Uncle Chet. I'm so sorry about all of this stuff. I haven't seen you since you were 2 years old." Susan put her hand on Roger's shoulder. "Just relax, son. We have to wait to see what Sheriff Murdoch says." Chester was shaking all over. "Deputy, believe me. I spent 8 years in the state pen for something I didn't do. But I have paid any debt to society. I was a free man until I heard you were shot. I don't want to be known as a cop killer. I want to stay alive." Allen put his good hand on Chester's shoulder. "Chet, just relax. When Sheriff Murdoch gets here, he'll sort everything out." There was a knock at the front door, and Roger ran to open the door for Sheriff Murdoch. As Sheriff Murdoch walked in, he said, "Mr. Allen, may I call you Chet? My deputy here is Allen Smith. It would be easier if I didn't have to think Allen and Mr. Allen." Chester looked up at the imposing figure before him. "Yeah, Chet would be okay." Sheriff Murdoch sat at the table between Allen and Amber. "Susie, may I have a cup of coffee?" "Chet, Sheriff Kent sent me everything on you, including the trial transcript. It seems that your conviction was based solely on your brother's testimony. I am inclined to believe you when you say you're innocent." Chester turned pale and began to sob. "My brother ruined my life. Oh, Lord, I forgive Seth, but I can't forget the 8 years in prison. I lost my wife, my kids, my life." Sheriff Murdoch turned to Allen. "We have eliminated Chet here as a suspect, but we still have the problem of who shot you and why. Amber, you stay here tonight. Chet, where do you live?" Chester shrugged. "I'm homeless. I've been homeless since I was released from prison a year ago." You could see the concern on Susan and Roger's faces. Roger piped up, "Uncle Chet could stay with me." Allen shook his head. "No. Chet could sleep on the sofa, and Amber could take the guest room." Amber almost shouted, "No. I'll be on duty. I do not sleep on duty. I stay in the living room. Uncle Chet could stay in the guest room." Sheriff Murdoch sat quietly, then turned to Allen. "How do you feel about Chet staying here, Allen?" Chet turned. "I could strip. You could check me out. I have no guns besides the .45 I gave you." Allen sighed. "I don't think that will be necessary. Amber is always alert. The guest room door is visible from the living room. And she is an expert shot. And I will set up my motion detector to detect motion in the hallway. The only other way in or out is through the window. We'll lock every door and window in the house. We should all be safe." Chet looked at his feet. "I guess you still don't trust me." Allen put out his hand. "That's not the point, Chet. There is still someone who tried to kill me out there." Allen continued, "If you're not that person, they could still get to me, and everyone else in this house. I will also activate the sensors outside." Susan looked up. "Amber, Chet, have you eaten?" Amber replied, "No, I'd been tailing Uncle Chet since about 2 this afternoon." Chester started, "You've been following me all afternoon? No wonder I felt like a target all afternoon. But Susie, I haven't eaten for the last 3 days. Susan went into the kitchen and made up 2 plates of lasagna, 2 bowls of salad, and some garlic bread. She brought them out and set them before Amber and Chester. Roger brought out 2 big glasses of water and knives, spoons, forks, and a few napkins and set them on the table. Amber bowed her head and then began to eat. Chester grabbed a fork and began to stab a piece of lasagna. But when Amber bowed her head, he stopped, bowed his head as well, then began to eat. Chester, with a mouthful of lasagna, said, "Thanks, thank you, Susie, thanks, Roger." Then he lifted his head, "Thanks, God." They all sat quietly, each in their own reverie. Then Sheriff Murdoch stood. "Well, I guess I'll go back home. Amber, take tomorrow off. I'll send George to guard Alan and his family tomorrow evening." Roger jumped up and ran to the door and opened it for the sheriff. As Sheriff Murdoch stepped out, a shot rang out, and Sheriff Murdoch dropped to the ground. He shouted to Amber, "Call for backup, officer down." Alan grabbed the .45 in front of him. He ran to the door and peered out. He saw Sheriff Murdoch on the ground. "Sheriff, you okay?" "No, Alan, I'm shot in the gut." Alan dropped the gun and grabbed Sheriff Murdoch's foot, and began to drag him into the house. Amber grabbed the other foot, and she and Alan worked to drag the sheriff into the house. Amber said, "Sheriff, Alan, help is on the way." Ambulance 2. Susan, Roger, and Chester ran in. They took Sheriff Murdoch into the sofa and Susan began to try to stop the bleeding. "Amber, call dispatch to get David. Dr. Phillips to the ER stat. Sheriff Murdoch has a bullet in his gut." Amber relayed the message to the dispatcher. They heard a siren, ambulance, and patrol cars. Several patrol cars by the sound of it. The siren stopped as they arrived on the scene 10:23. Deputies poured out of the patrol cars, armed to the teeth, helmets, vests, pistols, and carbines. It looked like a big city SWAT team had arrived. Under-Sheriff Johnson led and directed the deputies in their search. He walked over to the house and knocked on the door. Amber opened the door and stepped back to allow him to enter. About that time, the ambulance arrived, and 2 deputies escorted the medics to the house. Susan had stabilized the sheriff, and he was ready for transport. However, Steve would not allow anyone outside until he was assured that the area around the house was safe. Alan had seen the group of deputies that had arrived. "Steve, what's the deal? We don't have that many deputies." He answered, "Half of them were sent over by Sheriff Kent. If this a random cop killer, they just might be next." After about 30 minutes, there was a knock at the door. Steve used the peep to see who it was. It was George Pond. "Seems to be all clear, Steve." Steve turned to the medics. "Okay, let's get the sheriff to the hospital." Stepping out, Steve called to the group of deputies, "Let's surround the sheriff, and get him into the ambulance." Susan ran out and jumped into the ambulance and sat near Sheriff Murdoch. She shouted, "Okay guys, 10:39, emergency, lights, and siren, 10:4. The driver responded, 10:4, Dr. Smith, 10:4. 2 patrol cars started up, 10:39, one in front of the ambulance and one behind. Steve looked around. "Okay guys. Nothing more we can do now. Let's get back to work. Hey, you guys from Henry County. Thanks a lot. Take care. Tell Sheriff Kent, thanks, things are okay for the moment. But we still have a cop killer on the loose, take care." Everyone returned to their patrol cars and drove away. Steve stepped back into the house as Roger handed him a cup of coffee. Amber stepped over to Steve. "Steve, Sheriff Murdoch ordered me to stay with Alan and his family. Could you have someone pick up Dr. Smith and bring her home when they get done with the sheriff, please?" Steve sipped his coffee. "I'll have George pick her up." "Thanks for the coffee, Roger, it's great. Alan, soon as I finish this coffee, I'll be on my way too. I'll put deputies in the hospital to guard John." Alan shook his head. "Thanks, Steve. Our love to Emily and the kids. Good night and thanks." The rest of the evening was quiet. Amber, Chester, and Alan sat and listened to music and talked about anything except the shooter. At 8, Roger was sent to get ready for bed. When he had bathed and put on his PJs, he came out to see Alan. "Dad, I'm scared." Alan put his arms around his son. "So am I, son. You go crawl into my bed. I'll be in when your mom gets home." "Okay?" Roger seemed relieved. "Okay, Dad." He kissed his dad, shook Uncle Chet's hand, and hugged Amber. "Good night." And off he went. After a few minutes, Chester seemed to drop off. So Alan woke him and showed him the guest room, gave him a razor, towel, and such and said, "Good night, Chet." George brought Susan home about 10. She reported that Sheriff Murdoch was okay. The wound was bad, but the sheriff was a strong man and would heal quickly. I expect that he will be back on the job, at least partly, in a day or two. Then she and Alan went off to bed. In the bedroom, Susan saw Roger. What's this? Alan smiled. He was scared. I can take him into his own bed. Susan replied, you forget, you can't. Let him stay. We'll be fine. And that's the way it was. Amber was alert all night. Then about 8 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Alan, Susan, and Roger were up about to have breakfast. Amber answered the door. She peered out at the man on the step. Yes? The man stepped back. I'm sorry. I'm the Smiths' next-door neighbor, and I wanted to tell Alan about what my surveillance camera saw last night. Amber turned. Alan was right behind her. Morning, Bill. What have you got? Bill held up a cassette tape and replied, I have something on this tape you and the deputy here need to see. As they walked to the living room, Bill asked, Alan, you got a surveillance system like mine, don't you? Alan looked back at Bill. Yeah, we bought our systems the same place and the same day, remember? They went into the living room to the entertainment center. Bill smiled. Aha, the same place I've got mine. Alan took his tape out and put Bill's in and started the replay. Bill reached over and set the unit to the time frame he wanted Alan and Amber to see. Watch closely at the big oak in my backyard. The scene unfolded on the TV monitor. They saw a figure run up behind the oak. Bill said, watch. They saw Sheriff Murdoch walk across Bill's lawn and out of the frame. Bill set the unit forward a bit. Ah, here it is. From the oak there was a flash, then the figure darted away from Bill's house. Bill turned to Alan and Amber. Anything you can use there? Amber looked at Alan. Anybody else in your neighborhood have a surveillance unit too? Bill turned. Alan, doesn't Andy, behind your house have one? Alan replied, yeah, he has one like ours. Amber looked at the two guys. May I call you, Bill? Bill shrugged. Yeah. Amber said, Bill, would you introduce me to this Andy guy? As you know, Alan can't go out in his condition. We need to see if his unit caught anything. Bill agreed, and they left. Alan, keep that .45 handy. Amber and Bill left the house and walked to the home behind Alan's home. Bill knocked at the back door, and it was opened by a woman who asked what they wanted. Amber replied, Sheriff Murdoch was shot last night leaving the Smith house, behind you. We understand you have a surveillance unit, and we want to take the tape from last night to see if we can identify the shooter. The lady called out, Andy, there's a deputy here who wants our surveillance tape from last night. From in the house. Okay, I'll bring it out. Just a minute. A man appeared in the door with a tape in his hand. Oh Bill, what's going on? Bill explained the situation and Amber and Bill returned to Alan's house. Amber took the tapes and went to the sheriff's office and gave them to Stephen, explaining the thought that maybe the State Bureau of Investigation might be able to find something useful on the tapes. Stephen called the Bureau and asked if they had the ability to enhance the image on the surveillance tape. Stephen was shuffled around to several offices but was finally connected with the technology lab and was told that, yes, they could enhance the images. Stephen told the person in the Bureau lab that he was going to send the tapes by Corporal George Pond, instructing George to stay around to bring back the enhanced images. Stephen explained that they seemed to have a cop killer loose in their area and that Alan and the sheriff had both been ambushed. The lab technician promised to expedite the case. Stephen called George and had him get the tapes and take them to the Bureau Technology Lab. George, don't break the speed limit, but do go as quickly as you can. George saluted Stephen and left with a quick step. Stephen ordered that the deputies would be in pairs. This would increase the workload, seeing that two officers, Alan and the sheriff, were incapacitated. For the time being, the remaining officers would have to pull 12-hour shifts. Late that evening George returned with the enhanced pictures obtained at the State Bureau of Investigation lab. Stephen looked at them, puzzled. George, is this the best the Bureau's lab could do? George replied, I was there every minute. I saw the results, and this is 100 times better than the original. Stephen frowned. Now what, George? George thought, hey, there is a pretty good profile and a muddy three-quarter view. Maybe Susie could make something from what we have. Stephen wondered, it's late. Should I call her now or in the morning? He grabbed the phone and dialed her number. Susie, Steve, we need you, now. A groggy Susie replied, give me half an hour, and I'll be there. Stephen told George to get some sleep. Your shift ends in 20 minutes anyway. George turned and left. Stephen waited until Susie got there, showed her what he hoped she could do. Amber came in to relieve Stephen and to command the department. Susie stood bent over the drafting table and worked on the sketch.
This chapter, Chapter 8, is longer than I wanted, so I split the chapter into 2 segments. Please continue on the Chapter 8-2.